Hi, welcome everyone to the 12th annual Sketch to Screen Costume Design Panel. And if you can imagine, I've been doing this for 12 years and I'm still nervous. So forgive my shakes, and I am going to read so I remember everything. Today's panel will briefly explore the life of a costume designer and the creative process of bringing the people in the movies to life. At the conclusion of this event, you can find more information about the distinguished costume designers on this panel and the David C. Copley Center for the Study of Costume Design in the chat box. So keep your chat box open. It's going to be alive. Also in the chat box, a recording of this event will be uploaded to the UCLA TFT YouTube page. Now, we costume designers are actively engaged in a long overdue wage equity battle. For more information about wage equity and why we deserve to earn more money for the value that we provide to every single film and production, please contact the Costume Designers Guild Local 892, Pay Equity at cdgia.com, hashtag Naked Without Us, and those will be in the chat as well. After our conversation, please ask our panelists a question, and down below you're going to find a Q&A button to submit your questions, and we're going to attempt to answer questions that time allows. So here are some really quick thank yous. First and foremost, the School of Theater, Film, and Television at UCLA acknowledges our presence on traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Gabrielino Tongva peoples. And before I introduce our designers, I'd like to thank the people who make this each year. Our producer, Crystal Santana, Mark Sigler, my longtime film editor, John Solomon, Copley Center Research Director, Natasha Rubin, and our interim TFT Dean, Brian Kite. David Copley would have been 70 years old this year. It was his passion for the movies and for costume design that gave me and gave us a home at UCLA, for which we will forever be grateful. Please take a look at some of the work that these wonderful designers have created this year. Here's the montage.
Is it playing the montage? Here. Your face.
Please lock me away and don't allow the day here inside where I hide with my loneliness. I don't care what they say, I won't stay in a world without love. Birds sing out of tune and rain clouds hide the moon. I'm okay, here I'll stay with my loneliness. I don't care what they say, I won't stay in a world without love. So I wait, and in When she does, I'll know. So baby, until then, lock me away. And don't allow the day here inside where I hide with my loneliness. So I wait, and in a while I will see my true love smile. She may come, I know not when. When she does, I'll know. So baby, until then, lock me away. And don't allow the day here inside where I hide with my loneliness. I don't care what they say, I won't stay in a world without love. So I wait, and in a while I will see my true love smile. She may come, I know not when. When she does, I'll know. So baby, until then, lock me away. And don't allow the day here inside where I hide with my loneliness. I don't care what they say, I won't stay in a world without love. I don't care what they say, I won't stay in a world without love.
It's so thrilling for me to see the work of my colleagues and to see how their work contributes to the movie. Because movies are about people and about people's stories, and it's our job to make those people come to life. So it occurred to me that without Brian Kite, I have to introduce myself for those of you who don't know me. And I'm going to take an embarrassing moment to really just introduce myself. In brief, many of you have seen my costume design for Indiana Jones in Raiders of the Lost Ark, for Coming to America, for which I was nominated for an Oscar, or that red jacket for Michael Jackson's Thriller. In midlife, I received my doctorate in the history of design. I was president of the Costume Designers Guild. I was a governor of the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences. I curated an exhibition, Hollywood Costume, at the Victoria and Albert Museum. I wrote 6 books, and with David Copley, I founded this center at UCLA. And that's a lot of stuff. I also have 2 kids, so, but that's my self-introduction. More importantly, right now, I need to introduce my friends and colleagues. So Jenny Bevan. And Jenny Bevan, OBE, is a 2-time Academy Award winner and a mother of 1, and has received 11 Oscar nominations, many of her collaborations on Merchant Ivory films, some co-designed with the wonderful John Bright. These include The Remains of the Day, Howard's End, Maurice, and the Bostonians. Her many film credits include Jefferson in Paris, Anglis, Sense and Sensibility, Anna and the King, Gosford Park, The Black Dahlia, Sherlock Holmes, King's Speech, and Mad Max Fury Road, for which she won an Oscar. And thank you, Jenny. And Jenny's here from Australia. And I'm going to continue to Paul Tazwell. The complete and lengthy bios of each of these amazing people you can find on that website in the chat. Paul Tazwell has been designing costumes for the stage and screen for more than 30 years. His contribution to West Side Story has garnered him his first Academy Award nomination. His other screen credits include Harriet, The Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks, The Wiz Live, for which he won an Emmy in 2016, and Jesus Christ Superstar Live in Concert. His remarkable theater credits include the original Tony Award-winning Broadway productions of Hamilton, In the Heights, Ain't Too Proud, Carol Interchange, and The Color Purple. Louis Sequeira received his first Academy Award nomination in 2018 for the great Guillermo del Toro's The Shape of Water, and is nominated again this year for his contribution to Del Toro's crime drama Nightmare Alley, before transitioning into film and television 36 years ago. But Louis, you only look like you're 36 years old. Sequeira was a fashion designer with his own boutique. He recently completed the designs for Guillermo's Netflix anthology series, The Cabinet of Curiosities. Massimo Cantini Perini has been fascinated by the history of costume from an early age. This year, he received his second Oscar nomination for Joe Wright Cyrano, following last year's nomination for his work in Matteo Garrone's Pinocchio. He is the only Italian costume designer to have been awarded 3 consecutive Donatello Awards. And that's the Italian Oscars. With a collection of over 4,000 pieces, Massimo, all of us want to see those 4,000 pieces. Spanning from 1630 to 1990, unbelievable. He is both a collector and a scholar of period dress. Thank you also to Marina Spagnolo for her Italian translation. Bob Morgan, a first-time Academy Award nominee and Costume Designers Guild Award winner, Bob Morgan has amassed nearly 40 years experience as a costume designer, assistant costume designer, and hardworking costume supervisor. He was a fashion designer before embarking on his long and storied career in the entertainment industry. Bob Morgan is also a well-known painter whose work has been shown at Art Basel in Miami Beach, and he's represented by the Wren Gallery in Los Angeles. Jackie West has earned Academy Award nominations for her contributions to Dune, The Revenant, The Curious Case of Benjamin Button, and Quills. After a successful 20-year career designing fashion, her first foray into film was as a creative consultant on Philip Kaufman's Henry and June. This led to future projects collaborating with distinguished filmmakers like Terrence Malick, David Fincher, Alejandro Inarritu, and Denis Villeneuve. And Jacqueline just completed the huge Martin Scorsese's Killers of the Flower Moon. That's a, you know, and that doesn't even say it all. That's just, boy, talk about the cliff notes. That's just a tiny sampling of all of your life's work. I would like to start, and we're going to talk for about 30 minutes, and then we're going to start taking questions. But my first question to all of you is one that's really not going to surprise you considering the source, which is, what's the greatest misunderstanding about costume design? So do you want to start, Jackie? What's the greatest misunderstanding?
Wow. I'm never at a loss for words, but I am on that one. I think its importance is underestimated. It's the first place that an actor encounters his character. And for me, it's the bridge from the actor to the character. And it's where they find who they're going to be in the entire movie. And it's the details that, like Anna East Nin said, just a hanky and a purse or a certain pocket watch can really tell you who that person is. It reveals their inner riches. And I think it's not deemed as important as it really is by say producers that we're always wrangling with to get the money to do what we have to do to really expose those characters properly. So I think it's a misconception that it's just clothing, you know, that we go out and find and put on someone. But
Jenny,
it
Jenny,
reveals the texture.
what can you add to that?
Well, I totally agree with Jackie, but I think there's a definite misunderstanding that we're fashion designers, which we absolutely aren't. We're storytellers. I myself have little interest in fashion or indeed in clothes, other than being comfortable. And I think, you know, it's a storytelling aspect of it that is so important. And the act of finding the part is absolutely true. But I also think, you know, people really think it's glamorous that we drift around, you know, having sort of cocktails with actors and having a jolly nice time. They've no idea where everything from psychotherapists to mothers, you know, which is actually part of the joy of the job. I don't mind that in the least, looking after them. I think it's rather fun. But definitely they think it's glamorous, and that's probably my contribution.
Somebody once made the mistake of asking Anne Roth if she was having fun. She said, yeah, the job is not what I would describe as fun. Louis, do you see a big difference between designing for modern? That's one of the big misunderstandings I encounter is this, that there's no costuming in modern movies. Now Nightmare Alley is definitely a period film, but in your life and in your work, and because you started out as a clothing designer, do you see a big difference in how you prepare? Is your research more or less the same? How do you, where do you see the misunderstanding is about costuming for modern films and period films?
Well, obviously, with period films, everyone is not an expert, but it seems when we do something modern, everyone wears clothes, so everyone thinks they're an expert on what looks good, what's right for the character, and so I find with modern, one really needs to send home that message that it is about character building, and it's about taste level, and not everyone has good taste. Not every character has great taste, and we have to emphasize that if that's part of the story and part of the character. So and very often I find, even with modern, I tend to build because to find the exact thing that I want in the right fabric and the right size, I'm just not going to find it. I would just be more comfortable to build accordingly. So for me, I take that route. As for misconceptions, I would say I think a lot of people think we sit there and decide whether we want a warm gray or a cool gray, or is that, you know, that pink a little too blue, and you know, as we all know, it is sometimes I feel like we're in the lightning round and we make decisions like that day in and day out, and it's a lot more involved than it appears from the outside.
Okay, but I just want to get away from, you know, our inside baseball talk. When you say build, you mean make costumes to order.
Make the costumes in-house, yes.
And when you and when you make those costumes to order, those modern costumes to order, tell me, would you be aging those costumes or distressing those costumes before they get on the screen? Could you tell us a little bit about that?
So even if something is supposed to be brand new, I still take it through the aging process to give it a little bit of life. And of course, you know, anything that has an age or a history to it, we have to put it through that aging process. And very often I will actually do the fabric first. We'll make the garment to a certain point, we'll age it again, and then we finish it off. Because when you do those final hems, that's when you can actually finalize the final patina.
Yeah, it's amazing that most people don't wear new clothes every day.
It's true.
Paul, what's the greatest misunderstanding you find when you say, "Hey, I'm a costume designer," and people say, "Oh, that must be."
I would say that the how much our eyes touch, over a film, we're making decisions about potentially everything that is landing on screen. I mean, that's my way to do it, is to have chosen and designed, all the background as much as I can. So it's not just about the principles and making them look beautiful, but it's actually in creating a full world that the designer is in control of.
And by the background, you mean all the people in the frame.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right. And I want to ask you the obvious question, because you spent a lot of your life designing costumes for the stage.
Sure.
Let's just touch on, for our audience, our guests, what's the difference? Here's the frame.
I would say size and scope. With a live theater production, like you said, you always have the frame, and you are balanced as a design. You're balancing everything that you can see within that frame. With film, the frame is always, it's moving in a different way. I mean, it's all forever moving. So I think that the considerations become greater because that frame, that picture changes more rapidly. With theater, you have the opportunity to create paintings that are set for a certain amount of time, and then they shift over to another kind of painting, another visual that then gets set. The whole way through, you're trying to render the character as accurately as possible and make the relationship of one character to another make sense with the story and bring light to the story that's being told. But I think that it's just a larger undertaking to design for film than for theater. Depending on what the film is. There are Broadway shows that have been pretty massive that I've designed, but I think I would say size and scope, definitely.
It's so funny. I only designed a few plays in my life, but I was so disappointed that after everybody was on stage, they told me to go home.
Yeah.
There was nothing else for me to do.
Yeah.
They said, right. I said, don't you want me to? No, you can go home now, right?
Yeah.
That was so disappointing, actually. Also in stage, the audience gets to look at those costumes for a long time.
Yeah, definitely. So there are, I think that it goes into how we theatricalize our storytelling in theater productions. You buy into abstraction, you buy into time, and how time kind of it slows down a bit, which becomes a theatrical expression, I think. Also with shape, silhouette, color, you can make choices that are more poetic, I would say, than with film, where if you're in like with West Side Story, we were on a real street with real concrete, with real buildings. You want for the clothes to align with that, at least, and make sense with how the overall visual is being told, what's actually in front of you. So I think I love both for what they bring to my world and my passion, definitely.
Right. Oh, Paul, I'm not going to ask you to choose.
Nope.
You don't have to choose, and you don't have to choose today.
Okay.
Sure. Bob, what do you think is the greatest misunderstanding? And you really have a career. You've done everything. So what have you seen on all the sides?
I would say it is, of course, I agree with what everyone has said, but also I don't think people understand the years of experience doing all kinds of things, not only costumes, but what we did before we did costumes, that adds up to where we find ourselves now. I often, when I talk to young people, and I'll say, it doesn't matter what you're doing, it will all add up to something. And there won't be a bad experience. There may not be fun, all of them, but each of those experiences is going to lead you to that place. And then you can turn around and look and say, okay, that all made sense. I did learn to do that. And I've been fortunate, not only to have worked with Jackie in this capacity for my first time, but in other capacities as a supervisor, and we're good friends, and over the years have done just about every job, from aging to being on the set to shopping to fitting to on a variety of modern and contemporary and science fiction and different genres. So I don't think when people look at costume design, they realize that the huge amount of experience that you build on.
Yeah, I think that's a brilliant statement, actually, with no disrespect to everybody else, but it is, I try to encourage students to let them know that they're going to live long lives. And this accumulation of ideas and knowledge, that no time is wasted. No time. If they have a passion for history, they'll keep that passion for history, whatever their passion is. I have a passion for gardening. It all feeds into who I am, right? Massimo,
Yeah.
hi.
Hi.
So you have this huge collection of period clothing. Have you worked designing, or have you designed modern films? And what do you think is the greatest misunderstanding between about costume design, or about costume design and fashion? How do you feel about that?
Ok. Marina, mi puoi tradurre per favore un pochino?
Thank you, Marina.
Al di là della questione dell'incomprensione che c'è per quanto riguarda i disegnatori dei costumi, anche quella che è la tua passione da collezionista. E sei
Sì,
lavorato in film
Ok.
moderni.
Allora, sì, ho lavorato in film moderni e per me affrontare la contemporaneità è davvero difficile, perché avendola sempre davanti agli occhi, far arrivare un'idea che sia diversa e comprensibile al pubblico per me è molto difficile. Infatti lavoro sempre con il vintage, perché penso che sia l'unica chiave per poter essere un pochino diversi, e non mi piace lavorare con gli sponsor perché credo che siano un po' impersonali. Il costume naturalmente è lo studio che io ho sempre fatto, e quindi è la cosa che mi rimane più facile, il pane quotidiano per me. E la collezione è naturalmente il mio bagaglio personale, perché avendo tutti i giorni davanti agli occhi dei pezzi originali riesco comunque a studiare e a tradurre il mio pensiero alle sarte in modo completamente limpido e sempre sicuro. Sì, però la contemporaneità mi piace molto, ma deve sempre avere un'idea importante, come per esempio ho avuto con Dogman, che fino all'ultimo secondo non riuscivo a capire la chiave giusta, ed entrando in una mostra di De Chirico poi mi si è aperta la mente, perché quell'assenza ha fatto sì che mi scattasse in mente l'idea per i costumi.
So I have always found doing contemporary costumes for film quite difficult, because, you know, contemporary clothing is in front of our eyes constantly. And to get the possibility of conveying something different and being understood is absolutely difficult for me. This is why I always refer to vintage wardrobes. And for contemporary movies, in fact, I do not like to work with sponsors so much, because it looks like extremely impersonal to me. You know, for me, costume design is a study, is research. And so the fact that I own this huge collection is like a big luggage, a big case that I can carry around and open up as a treasure chest, so as to always be able to convey to the seamstresses and tailors what I wanted to achieve and obtain by the costumes. Again, going back to contemporary, you know, I like it so much, contemporary films, I mean, set in that period, in contemporary period, but I find it difficult and until I get the spark, the idea. For example, with Dogman, I had a lot of difficulties in achieving the right idea. Then I visited an art exhibition, De Chirico, by the way, and that was it. That was the spark that opened up my mind. And from that, I got the idea and was able to design the costumes.
Thank you for that, Massimo. I think that, you know, the public doesn't think about and shouldn't think about that each and every person that we meet in a movie had a life before the movie began. And we have to know who they are and where they were before the movie began. And that's the difficult part of it. And if we were designing this panel, and you, Massimo, me, Deborah, Bob, Louis, Jenny, Paul, and Jackie, we'd have to know where we started this morning, what we packed in our suitcases. We'd have to know a lot about us. And that makes modern costuming so difficult and hard to make authentic. But my biggest question for you, Massimo, are you ready, Marina? Massimo,
Yes.
will you share this collection?
Of course, I would love to. Absolutely.
Okay, everyone heard him. He's sharing. That's the
Yeah, I'll be calling.
that's the question of the hour. Will you share? Okay, so now I'm gonna move on a little bit. I'm going to move on a little bit to what would seem to be an obvious question for this panel, and probably what our guests want to hear most about, were, you know, the joys and the challenges of designing the movie you were nominated for. So why don't we start? We'll start with Massimo this time. Massimo, designing Cyrano. What was the biggest challenge to get Cyrano on screen?
Mamma mia. Il tempo perché la green light è arrivata molto tardi per me e ho avuto 26 giorni di preparazione. Ho fatto più di 750 abiti nuovi e non abbiamo mai smesso di cucire fino all'ultimo giorno di film. E quindi credo che per ognuno di noi il tempo sia la cosa più importante. Però grazie al piano di lavorazione sono riuscito insomma a fare tutto in tempo, ho avuto un team pazzesco ed è grazie a loro anche se sono qui.
Well, I would say that the greatest challenge was time in this respect, as you see, the green light for the film arrived pretty late for me, and I only had 26 days of preparation of pre-production. That meant that I had to make 750 costumes from scratch, and I never stopped sewing from the first of these 26 days to the last day of the shoot. So that was pretty compelling, but nonetheless, we managed to achieve everything in time thanks to a perfect scheduling and thanks to the perfect teamwork that I had with me.
E anche il problema del Covid era in mezzo a tutta questa confusione perché venivano fermate le stoffe alla dogana e ho avuto veramente paura di non farcela, ma poi alla fine la magia del cinema esiste anche nella realtà, poi alla fine.
Moreover, another very big challenge was COVID, because we were shooting in the COVID period, and most of the fabrics were stopped at the customs for quarantine. And so I was really, really scared that I was not going to make it in time. But nonetheless, we achieved the magic of film, the magic of cinema in reality.
But Massimo, you were paid so much money on that film, and you had such a huge budget, right?
No, io sono stato pagato bene, grazie a Dio, avevamo molti soldi, però devo dire che la produzione ci ha aiutato davvero, davvero tanto, venendoci incontro per il tempo, anche perché in Italia ad agosto è tutto chiuso, quindi ho avuto veramente cioè il tempo è stato il mio nemico maggiore, ma è un po' il mio karma, perché anche per il racconto dei racconti ho avuto un mese di preparazione, per Ofelia ho avuto 5 settimane, quindi credo che in una vita passata abbia fatto qualcosa per cui la devo scontare oggi.
You see, you're right. I had a good pay and the budget was very interesting, absolutely. But you know, the production was aware of the time constraint that we had. And so that, of course, they knew that they had to help us. By the way, you need to know that in August in Italy, everything is shut down, everything is closed. And so that was the greatest constraint I had to fight against. Time was my enemy. Probably this is in my karma, because even when I worked at Tale of Tales, I only had 1 month's time and 5 weeks for Ophelia. So I must have done something in my past lives that strikes back.
Yeah, good karma. Good karma, Massimo. Good costume karma.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. Jenny, what
Thank
was
you.
the biggest challenge for Cruella?
Well, I would have said time, but having heard Massimo, we had all the time in the world. I can't
Oh, he
complain.
shamed everyone.
I'm absolutely, I mean, we had 10 weeks, you know, come on. I could have made 4 films and stood on my head in that time. But in truth, I mean, Cruella is quite big and has some costumes that took a hell of a long time to make because of the logistics in them, even if they're on screen for the better part of 15 seconds, some of them. But I think it was pretty fast. I mean, for me, at least I remember the 70s first time around. So, you know, because I'm very old. So that was actually wonderful. But also, I didn't remember a lot of the sort of fashion and all that. So I had to learn all that. But I don't want you to think it wasn't fun as well. We did cope, but oh my goodness, that's a story and a half. I'm afraid it's so in awe now. I'm, you know, I can't say I had that many problems. I also had the most wonderful crew and the most phenomenal cast, all of whom brought every costume to life. And so, you know, I remember more joy than I do stress, although it was pretty stressful at times. But anyway, oh, Massimo, I am in awe.
Yes, Massimo, maybe I shouldn't have started with you.
Yeah.
I think you shut everybody up. Louis, what was the biggest stress for Nightmare Alley?
I'll take a pass. No, I think for me it was realizing that there were no 1930s clothes in North America when we first started, and so I had to pivot and went to Rome and Spain and the UK, and which was amazing to make some new friends and some new working relationships and see some wonderful clothes that I had not seen, and bringing because the movie had those two worlds. I had to prep them separately. There was no way to house all those costumes for the entirety of the show. And I think we started with the plan of going to the carnival, and then we went to the city. So we had to pivot. And then, of course, we were doing the city, and we went down for COVID, and had to come back after that and re-pull all the carnival clothes. And again, it was really building those two worlds for the carnival. Because of the rain aspect, everything was built for the leads and all the minor characters.
Because you had
we had multiples. We had to have multiples. Yeah,
right.
We had budgets for, you know, what if scenarios. Okay, it's pouring rain for 150 extras. Can we use the rental clothes? And I'm like, no, because the L&D is going to be in the hundreds of thousands, and I will never be able to rent clothes again. Right. From anybody. So
L&D, loss and damage.
Loss and damage, exactly.
And what about all the period shoes in the rain?
Exactly. Shoes, hats, coats, whatever. It would have all fallen apart. So there was the budget for 150 extras, budget for 75 extras, budget for 50 extras. And at the end of the day, it all kind of went away except for our characters. But yeah, it was really amassing all those fabrics in-house. Before production, to have that in the library, to be able to just build and build and build.
Wow.
The various, the various looks. And then again, we did a lot of the freaks which we never really saw in the movie, Bird Girl and Dog Boy and all those wonderful characters that we were so hoping to see, and yet they were left on the cutting room floor.
No, sometimes we just hate directors, right?
Well, I love my director.
I
just
know.
wish-
I mean, who doesn't love Guillermo? But when they cut out your favorite costumes, it's painful. It is painful.
Yes, I think my crew were a bit more pained than I. I mean, it happens, but they're like, what happened to? So we have the photos.
Yeah. All right. Wish we had time to show them now. I'm sure we would all love to see them.
They were fun. They were a lot of fun, for sure.
Thank you. Paul, what was the greatest challenge to bring West Side Story to life?
Starting out, I knew that I was up against a very beloved film, that was pretty iconic for American musicals, and Irene Sheriff's design. And so, coming up with a feel at a new vision for that was probably paramount for me, and something that can feel as iconic as possible up against that. And then just designing for dancers, which I do all the time, but it still is, when they're dancing 6 days straight, and it's in 115 degree Fahrenheit degree heat, and the asphalt is melting under their shoes, and and much like the original, I think that they did that as well. They're on top of the roof and dancing on asphalt, but we made it happen. I too had an amazing crew. My wardrobe supervisor was incredible, and all of my assistants were just right there with me at every moment, and it was just amazing how it all came together.
When it's so very hot, how do you cope with that? How do you cope with all that perspiration for the dancers? I mean, everybody must have that question, and the roof is melting. They're sticking onto the roof.
Yeah.
And how do you deal with working in such heat with so much dancing?
You rely on your costumers to stay on top of it, to dry off whenever you can, or switch out to the second, and then you make friends with those dealing with CGI, and and where they can help you to remove sweat stains, and that but for every dance number, except for those that were with the two gangs out on the street or in the rumble, it was great to see all of that sweat. But when we were at the dance of the gym, and you've got especially our female cast sweating through their dresses, that's not as attractive.
Right. So this is the first time I've ever heard of the removal of sweat in post-production by CGI, which is computers, just erasing that sweat. A little Photoshop underneath the arm, and the sweat goes away. Amazing. I could use that, actually. Thank you for that. All right, so the dynamic duo of Bob and Jackie. Who wants to go first? How did you go about collaborating on Dune, and what was your biggest challenge? Jackie, want to start us off?
Sure. My biggest challenge was the future. I have never tackled the future before in my history of film. And though I'm from Berkeley, and it's an iconic novel there, I knew I couldn't disappoint anyone. Initially, I said, no, I can't do the future, and Denise said, that's who I want you. I don't want it to look like a typical, but then I started reading it and looking at it, and went back to the book and to the Dune Bible. And I thought, oh my God, specialty costumes. I've never made a spacesuit in my life. And I decided I need help with this. And I knew that Bob had so much experience with specialty costumes and different genres of film that I'd never worked in. And so I asked him if he would come on and do it with me and tackle all of that. You know, that he would know where I could get them made and who was the best, and that he'd put together the most wonderful crew for us that would be able to make all of this, because it was daunting. You know, I'm really good at character dressing, and fortunately Denis loved my idea, which I called Modieval from the beginning, where I went because I'm a big John Berger fan, and I have been my entire life. And he says, always look to the past if you're going to try to talk about the future. So I really looked at medieval stuff, and that part was really, the soft clothing was easy for me. The challenge was really what you know, space suits and still suits and spacing guilds would look like in the future. And Bob,
Bob.
collaboration.
Of course, Massimo, I can't
Yes,
say a thing about
absolutely.
time anymore.
Yeah, our new
But we were short on time. And I remember Jackie and I, we first met with the producers and said, you know, you have 400 specialty costumes in this film, and they kind of blankly stared at us. And we both knew, you know, even though we had about half the amount of prep we needed, you know, I always rely on something someone told me years ago, which is not everything works the first day. So, but it really was a necessity, and based on our experience and our trust in each other and in the amazing staff and amazing assistants and all the artisans. But we did literally have to say that each specialty costume was going to be the prototype, that there was not going to be time to go back and revisit it. And we had the amazing trust of Denis and amazing Keith Christensen, and we're able to communicate wherever we were in the world. We built all over Europe, and Jackie and I frequently were not in the same place. We were kind of laughed that we were Zooming before there was Zoom. We were FaceTiming when Jackie was in LA and I was in Budapest, and Jackie was in Budapest and I was in England. And that was, I think the biggest challenge was at the first time. And they were presenting Denis supportive about that.
You broke up a little bit at the end there. You want to say that, whatever your thought was?
No, I just said production was very understanding about that, and literally we had people getting on airplanes with costumes and flying them back and forth like the day before they shot or 2 days before they shot, so they could be aged, knowing that those first costumes were going to be the costume.
You know, I wish we all had the time to write diaries or a memoir, and then it could, of course, it could never be published. But I wish.
There's involved.
Yeah, we certainly we wouldn't work in this town or any other town again. But the stories are just wonderful. 2 more questions, really brief ones from me, and then we'll go to our guests. What do you love about costume design, but what could be improved? And I know the easy one, more advanced time, more pre-production time, and a better salary, a salary commensurate, if that was possible, with our contribution. But other than those 2 things, what do you love about it? And Paul, you used the word poetic, which I love so much. What do you love about our work, and what could really be improved? So Jackie, why don't you start?
Oh, what I love. Jenny kind of touched on it. I love all the facets of it. I love being the psychologist and telling telling the actors who they really are, and you know, creating these backstories, as you talked about, Deborah, and giving them the backstory, and you know, talking my way onto the space shuttle with all of them, and you know, just that part I just have always loved.
What,
And
what could be better?
I think time, having more time would be the best. I'm not going to complain about my pay. I feel I'm lucky to be doing what I'm doing, and I would love all designers to feel that way. And I've been talking a lot about pay equity. I think probably for me though, it's having enough time. It's really stressful coming onto a project late, or you know, making it a race instead of a painting that you can, you know, work on for a year.
Well, and I would like to say that once you read that screenplay, you need time to internalize it.
Yes, exactly.
That's
And you really, Edith Head once said, don't even start a film until you've read the script 7 times.
yeah.
You've got to know the people from the inside out, each person that you dress, and reveal all the onion skins of their personality. And I remember once when I first started, I told my husband, I'm a fashion designer, I can't do quills. I'm a thoroughly modern Millie. And he said, no, you aren't. He said, you were an art historian. He said, you get to know those characters, because he's a writer. And he said, you get to know every character from the inside out. And then you take them shopping in that period and only put on them things you think they would pick.
Oh, things they would buy themselves.
Exactly. Right? Things they would choose for themselves. And he said, then you can't go wrong. And I went, okay, I'll do it.
So Paul, what's the best thing, the thing you love about it, and the thing you kind of wish was better?
The thing that I love about, there are 2 things that come to mind. One is the collaborative energy all the way, you know, at every given moment, you're working with groups of people coming together that are, you know, very talented, creative, problem solvers, and you know, you're all, you know, working towards this one intent, and that, you know, makes for a very exciting experience, you know, and full. I as well, I, you know, love investigating characters with the actors, and being, you know, it's gratifying to be able to solve some of that visually for the actors, and coming together on that. You know, and then I also love the, you know, the fact that, you know, I'm a storyteller, but I use the medium of clothing. I'm a painter, and I'm using the medium of fabric, and how that, and, you know, sculpture, and, you know, and all the researching that we do as costume designers. So, you know, the job has very many facets that all, you know, speak to me, speak to my passion, and, you know, it makes for an exciting career, definitely. I would say, you know, that what I don't like about it is respect. I mean, and that's a, you know, it's an understanding of what we do, the importance of what we do, and how we're seen, you know, is still dragging behind a bit. I mean, I have more, or I work with more and more people who really value what I bring to a production and to a film, but then there are just as, you know, many, if not more, that really don't. And you know, so I think that people need, you know, I'm about teaching them, you know, as I go, what I do, and you know, I think, you know, the younger set, I'm hoping, will grab hold of what we know is true, you know.
Thank you for that. We're all activists now. Bob, I'm just gonna twist this question a little bit. You're a painter. What does painting bring to your work?
as you were all speaking, I was thinking about this, that it is interesting to me that film is so related to painting and painting related to film. And when I'm looking at a canvas, or even before I have a canvas, there's a thought in your mind or some spark that wants to come and I always laugh. I said, there's a million things in my sketchbook. Whatever one fights the hardest will actually make it on the canvas. You know, it's kind of a battle to the painting. And I think costume is the same way. I love the aspect of it that it starts as a thought or as a word and an idea and becomes a sketch, and sometimes in your mind and then on paper or on the computer, and then watching that grow into the day you're standing on set and watching those costumes walk down the set. It opens up like this flower.
Yes.
And then when you see it on screen, I remember there were scenes in Dune I was so taken back how it looked in person, but then how it looked on the screen with the music, with the lighting. It was just this phenomenal painting come to life. And it's kind of a combination of painting and sculpture, moving sculpture, and yet set within a frame, combined with all the artistry that's being done by, like Paul said, this collaborative artistry of the costume designers, the set designer, the director, the art directors. I mean, just all those things, all those wonderful paints on the palette, you know, that have been put and made into this beautiful tableau.
I love that. Costume designer Mark Bridges said, it's everything I love in one job. All right. So I love that. Massimo, what do you love about costume design and what do you wish could be better?
Amo tantissimo l'estetica che uno è chiamato a rappresentare. Io credo che sia importantissimo riuscire a portare emozione sullo schermo, perché è quella che ho avuto fin da bambino guardando dei film, e l'estetica è veramente la cosa che io ambisco a fare sempre meglio di tutto. Poi il cinema è cultura e quindi attraverso di esso è un veicolo che può insegnare tantissimo alle persone, e credo che sia anche importante come il nostro lavoro è visto dagli altri. Quello che potrebbe andare meglio naturalmente appunto è avere più tempo, perché io credo che la tecnologia ha cambiato il mondo, ma non l'ha cambiato per noi, perché le cose sono ancora fatte a mano ed abbiamo bisogno delle maestranze che dalla stoffa trasformano in un vestito, e non succede premendo un pulsante. È cambiata la vita a moltissime persone che fanno cinema, ma purtroppo a noi ancora no.
So what I love about my job is the fact that it has to do with aesthetics, with the look. So I am going to work on what will represent that movie to the audience, which will convey the emotions on the big screen, the same emotions that I have felt when as a kid I used to go to the movies and I loved to watch them. And so this is what really drives me, do my job as better as I can so as to convey the best aesthetics. Also, what I believe is that film is culture, and film can really teach plenty of things to everybody. So the way in which we do our job is so important for us, but especially to the audience who is then going to watch the movie and digest all of the beauty that we have drawn into it. As far as what needs to be improved, well, I believe that the time aspect is what requires attention, because you see, technology has changed the world and has changed it quite a lot in many departments of filmmaking, but to us, well, no, it hasn't changed our life at all. We still need our hands, our handicraft ability, our artistry to sew and put together costumes. So we need, the collaboration of artisans who know what they need to do. And this is something that has not been yet understood. We cannot have, change and things done at the touch of our fingers, like in the other departments of technology.
Yes, you mean we're not magicians, really?
I wish.
We're not, we can't twiddle our nose and just make
And
an
I'm
alteration and make an alteration. Well, actually, to Paul's point, that is also a question of respect. And that's respect and understanding that we're professionals and we need time. And if we say we need time, we really need time. And also, to paraphrase a fabulous old supervisor, it's not for us, it's for the film. So we don't need the alterations. The film needs the alterations. So it is a question of respect. So I'm not going to cut this short. I'm just going to end our part of the conversation and get to questions. Lightning round. What are you working on now or doing next, Louis?
I'm taking a break. I just finished Cabinet of Curiosities. So I'm heading over to Portugal in about 12 days for a little R&R and visit some folks in Madrid and Rome and just enjoy a little bit of Europe.
Thank goodness. And make sure to go see Massimo's collection.
I want to, absolutely.
Where
I'll
is
be
it?
calling.
That's the collection. Where is it?
Okay, hold on, wait. He's going to tell you tomorrow night.
Okay, all right.
All right, Jenny, what are you doing now? What are you up to?
I'm in Australia. Well, I'm not at the moment, I'm actually in Los Angeles, doing Furiosa, which is a prequel story for Mad Max. And I just wanted to add one thing to the last. I love that phrase, these are hands, not wands, when people ask you to do ridiculous things ridiculously quickly. And as for respect, which is something I'm working on very hard, but trying to do it in a most positive way, because on Cruella, certain aspects were disrespected. A lot was good, but there were certain things done that were very, very wrong. And I am having a slow campaign on that, but only hopefully in a positive way to help us all.
Okay, maybe we should take that discussion offline.
Maybe. I don't know. I don't care, you see. I'm old
Bob,
enough, crusty enough to think someone's got to say it.
All right, Bob, what are you working on? What are you and Jackie working on right now?
Actually, I'm in Spain. Well, I'm in LA, but I'm able to luckily work from home in Spain on a. I can't tell you the title, but it's I'm doing pre-production, developing costumes for another kind of iconic. I'll say sci-fi. I hate saying that word, but futuristic project.
On the inside, it's SF.
Yes.
SF. Okay, Jackie, are you working on something that's SF?
Yes, I'm working on Dune 2. Actually, Dune Part 2. It's not.
Dune Part 2. Love that book. Love the movie. Thank you. Paul, what are you working on? Or what are you breaking? What are you doing?
I recently opened MJ on Broadway, which is the Michael Jackson or musical about Michael Jackson. And then I'm soon to start a film that's shooting in London, prepping and shooting in London. So that I'll be over there end of April.
Wonderful. Thank you for that. Massimo, what are you working on other than sharing this collection with everyone I just introduced you to?
I'm finishing a little Italian movie of Monica Vitti live, something like that, and I'm starting the new Michael Mann movie.
Oh, the new Michael Mann movie.
Yeah,
Can you tell us a
yeah,
little?
very nice.
Do we know? Is it period? What genre?
Yes, it's period. Is Ferrari history, Enzo Ferrari story.
Wow,
Yeah, it's nice.
I'm looking forward to that. Okay, let me ask you some of these questions that we've gotten. So, Mito Taha asks, I'd love to know a little bit more about communication. Is it always through the director, or does communication occur across departments, our creative collaborators, costume designer, production designer, cinematographer? And how does this line of communication differ? And I think that's the question here, from big budgets to independent. So in other words, and then they ask about, this person, Mito, asks about television. Now, in television, we know that the paradigm is different, that you work with showrunners or at the top of the pyramid, not the director. So let's just talk about film. Do you find a difference between working in an independent film or in a big budget film? And I'm going to direct this to Jackie, because Jackie really has worked on independent movies like with Terrence Malick, to the biggest budget movies like Dune. What do you think, Jackie? Is there a difference?
It has never been so for me. I've always been really, when I first started, Phil Kaufman, who brought me into the business, said, the director's your boss. That's who you listen to. That's who you go to. That's who makes the, that's who you have to please. And I've always kind of lived by that, whether it's Terrence Malick on a very low budget, indie budget, or David Fincher on an epic. It's, they've lived with the movie for so long before I come on. And if they're strong, good directors, they have a vision. And that vision, it's, it's like finding the plot in a murder mystery. You have to kind of know the right questions to ask them to get to the point of knowing what they want. And sometimes knowing what they don't want is just as important as knowing what they do want. That informs you just as much. But for me, the director's always been my guide. And like with Denis Villeneuve, we found that anything we put in front of Denis, he had lived, Dune, he'd been obsessed by since he was 12 years old. And if you put something in front of him and you didn't get, oh, I deeply love it, you had to go back to the drawing board. So yeah, for me, there's no difference. I think if you pick your directors and you have a good director with a strong vision, they're your guides. And it doesn't matter if it's low budget or big budget.
Anybody else?
Sorry. I would say that the directors are also different, that's what's interesting. And some of them do want to be totally in control, and some of them actually are really happy to leave it to you. So in that case, obviously you're, fulfilling your brief of clothing the actors, but also you're probably more in touch with the other disciplines. But I always love having that collaboration with, knowing how the cinematographer will shoot it, tip he knows, and what, always going and looking at all the stuff from set designers, and of course enormously close with makeup and hair, which is the most wonderful thing, where the person, the character is completed. We do so much, and the actor brings their body language, but without the makeup and hair, it probably would be quite sad.
Yeah, it would be really sad, which is why a bad wig so
not a good thing. Yeah.
Right, bad wigs make us so unhappy. Doesn't matter what you know, a bad wig is so terrible. So there have been questions about how we collaborate with the production designer, and everybody watching this sees that I'm in my library with bookcases behind me, and I'm dressed really colorfully, and the books are really colorful. You're all in hotel rooms because you're nominated. and you're going to go to the Oscars tomorrow. So you're all in very neutral environments, and I'm in a very warm environment. So how do you go about and when do you talk to the production designer, Lewis?
I talked to the production designer quite soon in just about what these worlds are going to be, what the color palettes of each of these worlds are going to be, and for forever checking back and forth to see what the furnishings are going to be with the set designer. And I've had many occasions where we will go to the set and there'll be 4 different colors of paneling and my fabrics, and we're comparing, and then we're asking the DOP to come in, and you know, because that's the other side of what we do. We can see something in pure light, which looks amazing, and then when it actually is photographed and lit, it's all of a sudden so dark that the color you thought you had, you don't have anymore. So that all is an informative aspect of what we do. So that collaboration constantly through a production is so important, so that you actually attain that synergy for the final product.
Oh, synergy is a good word. And DOP, director of photography, Melena Cananero once said to me, director of photography, we should be directors of costume design. Why aren't
Yes, we are.
of costume design? How come they can be directors? And she always said that, and it always stuck with me. Massimo, you're for the director of costume design. How do you work with the production designer?
Beh, io credo che appunto, come dicevo prima, l'estetica del film sia importantissima e quindi il lavoro con la scenografia è a stretto contatto con quello del costumista. Poi dipende molto anche dall'idea che ha un regista. In Cyrano, per esempio, Joe voleva che la color palette della scenografia fosse veramente quasi identica alla color palette dei costumi, in modo che tutti fossero assolutamente sempre ben integrati come colori. Però io adoro la scenografia, adoro l'arredamento soprattutto. A me quello che più mi affascina è l'arredamento, perché riuscire a dare anima ad una stanza vuota è la cosa più bella che c'è, oltre al mio lavoro naturalmente.
So, of course, the collaboration with production design is extremely important because, as I said earlier, aesthetics is what is extremely important for me. So this has to be absolutely underpinned. Of course, this collaboration depends very much on the ideas of the director, because it's up to him. In this case, well, Joe really wanted to achieve a color palette that was absolutely matching in all of the scenes. So he wanted an integrated color palette with the costumes, with the production design. He really wanted to achieve the same colors. As far as I am concerned, I'm really in love with the furnishing of production design, the way in which production designers are able to give a soul to an empty room is absolutely amazing for me.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and it's, you know, Massimo, it always interested me that set decorators are mostly women. Production designers are mostly men, but set decorators who deal in the soft life, the interior space, are mostly women.
It's true.
And it's the understanding, again, it's the human part of production design. It's not architecture. It describes who it is that's around you. It's fascinating, actually. Thank you for that. So here's a question. All right, so try to do this quick. How could you take, or could you please take one character costume from one of your movies and describe the thinking about the character and the function that went into the design? Do you think you could do that quickly, Jenny?
Golly, heavens, with great difficulty. Could you get the very beginning of that question? My mind went totally sideways and I was absolutely hoping everybody else would answer so I could formulate. Could you just do the beginning of the question again?
Yeah, the question is
so sorry.
To take one character,
Yeah.
one character, and from the script to screen really quick.
Okay, so Cruella is the obvious one. And you have a wonderful arc in the script. We actually had her as a toddler in the original script, and I did that because a toddler putting together clothes from her mother's laundry basket gave me the grounding I needed for her eccentric character. And then the arc of her journey to become a fashion designer, eccentric punk, and possibly in 25 years, Glenn Close was, you know, who knows, whatever. And an homage to Anthony Powell, obviously. There you go.
All right, thank you very much. Thank you very much. The great Anthony Powell, who designed 101 Dalmatians and 102 Dalmatians. Okay, Paul, script to screen in a minute and a half, less than that.
Okay, we'll talk about Anita, the dance of the gym dress. My thinking behind that was knowing that she is a dressmaker and has the ability to make whatever she wants and what she would potentially look good in. I found a photograph of Elizabeth Taylor that had been taken in the 50s. It was a headshot, a celebrity photo, and I imagined that Anita had seen this photo and recreated it in colors that were specific to her.
Wow.
Again, steering away from the original idea, I decided that and thinking that within this sea of color, I want for her to stand out, that I would put her in black, which gave her kind of a gravitas, which I really liked. And it also tied her to kind of a Spanish sensibility, which, it leans into, a Latinx culture. And then also the floral applique that we added to that, and along with that, choosing fabrics that would move in the way that I wanted for them to move, and that would pull up the same feeling as the original design that Irene Sheriff did. So there are a lot of different things that I was kind of juggling in there.
Got it. Thank you very much. Louis, could you do Kate Blanchett in about a sentence and a half?
Sure. I mean, for Kate, it really was about presenting this incredible female character that was femme fatale, but actually kind of not femme fatale. She was someone that was extremely powerful, and so it was putting together those fabrications for her pieces. And in the case of the suit where she needed to reveal her body, it was trying to design something that was immediately openable and still worked with sitting and moving, and with a shawl collar and the ultimate reveal. And then working with those fabrics in those low lights with some form of reflective quality, the stingray pebble nature of that black suit, which still reflected with so little light in that set, and giving the ode to the film noir that we were doing nouveau. Right?
So keeping it within genre. And also, so my question would be, did you test that fabric under that light?
So we tested the satins for sure, and we tested velvets for sure. But that fabric, I saw that fabric in the UK, and it was a little bit. And this is what happens for me anyway. I can be somewhere, and it's like a beautiful mind. Something will just pop out, and I saw that fabric, and I thought, that's Kate's suit. And so there was 6.5 yards. That's all there was, and we got it, and it cemented early on that was going to be a piece for Kate.
Now, wait a minute, Louis, you know that A Beautiful Mind is about autism. Okay, I'm just kidding.
No.
It's the creative process. I get it. All right, I have a very funny question that came up. Massimo, this is a funny question. I want you to answer it very seriously. Are actors always wearing shoes even in close-ups? And if you know a character will spend the entire scene behind a desk, I am reading this, do you still put the same extent of work into their trousers because it helps the actor remain in character?
Marina, aiutami.
Allora, se c'è un primo piano, tu ti occupi anche del resto del costume, sebbene sia in primo piano, gli metti anche le scarpe, e un attore, anche se dietro una scrivania, gli fai mettere anche i pantaloni, così entra nel personaggio?
Assolutamente sì, perché ci ho avuto un'esperienza bruttissima con il fotografo di scena ed è finita una foto su internet e nei giornali con l'attore mezzo vestito bene sopra e mezzo vestito bene sotto. Quindi adesso non credo più a nessuno, io li vesto completamente perfetti, in modo che almeno nelle foto ricordo, anche se nel film non si vedono, sono perfetti.
So the answer, sorry, to the question is absolutely yes, because I've had a horrible past experience that a still photographer who was a stills photographer on set made a photograph that ended into the press on a newspaper, and he took a photograph of an actor who was half dressed, which meant, oh no. So from now on, my actors will always be fully dressed because I don't want to encounter any similar problem again.
That's very funny. Thank you so much for that. All right, so we're about to close, but I do have two questions from students, and they're about the same. So I'm going to double it up and we're going to do everybody. A, what advice would you give students about choosing this career? And what is advice you have for college-aged or just out of college age young people aspiring to be costume designers? Let's start with you, Bob.
I harken back to what I said before. Do everything. Do every job. Do every experience you can, because it will lead you to somewhere that is the place you're supposed to go. And do this because you love it, not for the pay, not for the glamour, but really do this because you love costume and you love costume in your heart. I mean, that would be my best advice.
It's a calling. Paul.
I would definitely agree with Bob on that. You've got to be invested in this kind of creating and this kind of art, and want to work with others, because it's pretty impossible to do it alone. You're not going to meet the timeline that Massimo had to, by any any thought in the imagination. So I would say definitely I would embrace as much as possible about life experience and fold that into how you visualize stories, and know that your biggest challenge and opportunity is to tell stories as beautifully, accurately as you can.
Thank you. Jackie.
What's the advice I give everybody I work with is to read. I think that's what served me the best, is reading. All through college, I always felt that the film business, good liberal arts education serves you best, and don't stop reading and studying when you're out. Keep that up your entire life, and you'll find the characters more easily in film, and you'll embrace the story of anything you're working on, if you do.
Well, Massimo earlier talked about culture and used the word culture. And I think it's cultural literacy.
Yes,
It's
I agree.
But it's being alive to culture. So yeah, love that. Lewis.
I think for me, it really is about taking in as much as you can along your journey and not rushing to the designer level, so to speak. Yeah, I've learned so much assisting other designers, even after designing myself, been able to take a step back and assist some wonderful designers like Daniel Orlandi and Julie Weiss, and getting the insight of their process. You would never be able to get that in a college degree. It is being inside their heads and their creative abilities is wonderful. So I say that to a lot of young people: is take it slow, take in, empty your glass, fill it up with as much as you can, so that when you finally get to that place, you know, I think everyone can say every movie brings you something that helps you to your next job. I couldn't do this movie without having done all those other jobs beforehand. So don't be so quick, because it's easy to trip up if you don't have all that base of knowledge and experience.
Thank you for that. And every movie is so different experience, different people. Massimo, what is your advice for students?
Sì, per me il consiglio più grande che io posso dare è quello di continuare a studiare da soli sempre la sera, e di informarsi e di comprare più libri possibile, leggere e studiare il passato, perché la scuola dà moltissimo, gli incontri con i professori danno moltissimo, ma lo studio più importante è quello che fai da solo a casa, ed è quello che poi ti porterà anche ad aprire la tua mente il più possibile. Solo con la conoscenza del passato si riesce a poter cambiare e inventare il nostro lavoro in modo differente. Quindi lo studio per me è la cosa che più importante, e soprattutto di non avere fretta, ma di iniziare da zero per poi piano piano salire. Fare il costumista non è l'obiettivo massimo, perché ci sono in un team dei costumi tantissime figure importantissime e che possono dare anche tante soddisfazioni.
Well, my advice would be that of telling the students to study, continue to study at night when they're home, and read and buy books and read them, and of course achieve the best possible knowledge of the past, because of course the teachers and professors at school can convey a lot of knowledge to you, but what really opens up your mind is the continuation of studying. And you see, once you are aware and knowledgeable about the past, well, that's when you can change and invent as much as possible with our job. Another piece of advice would be of not rushing it. Do things calmly. You don't have to be a costume designer from scratch. You can, be in a collaborative team of the Department of Costume Designing. And then from zero up, you can grow and become the person you're meant to be. There are many people who are working in the Department of Costume Design, and the important aspect is being one of them.
Thank you so much, Massimo. Jenny, last words.
Well, everybody said it so eloquently and covered every aspect. I think what an extraordinary team of people you got together, Deborah. So my only addition is absolutely agree with everybody. You are part of a team. Do not expect to be a costume designer the minute you leave college. As everyone says, learn every aspect of the job. And the only thing I'd add, which I find really works, is being really kind and supporting my crew, because you get ever so much better work when you're being nice to people. And I just love that sort of thing of being the mother of the department, and definitely celebrating and supporting your crew, unless of course they're not very good, in which case you have to take other methods. But normally I'm blessed with the most phenomenal crews, and including my one in Australia, which I cannot speak highly enough of, not to mention my Cruella crew, who were astoundingly good. That's it.
So that's it. So Jenny, Massimo, Jackie, Paul, Bob, and Louis, thank you all so much for joining me and our guest today on a very busy day, I'm sure, before the Academy Awards. I send you all, each and every one of you, the best of luck, and with the deepest admiration for our guest. Please do go to the chat, get all those important sites that I don't know how to connect to, but go to the chat and get them. And I send each and every one of you luck and love.
Thank you, Deborah.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for getting us all together.
Yeah.
Bye, everybody.
Good to see everybody tomorrow.
Oh,
Thanks for letting me hear Italian.
everyone. It's so good.
Have fun, everyone.